You're listening to the Generational Wealth Through Commercial Real Estate podcast. Your host, Will Smith, is a former NFL player that found his passion in commercial real estate. Every week, you will learn from industry experts everything you need to know to get started investing in commercial real estate to build generational wealth.
All right, today we have Ryan Narus with us. He's a co-founder of Archimedes Group, LLC. He's syndicated and closed over $20 million worth of mobile home parks, 1,245 pads in the southeastern region of the U.S. He's created over 8.5 million in realized gains in property values through frontline operations. And he's also a host of the Mobile Home Parks in Real Life podcast. So, guys, definitely check them out. But Ryan, go ahead and give us a little bit of info on who you are and your background.
Sure. Well, I am a millennial. I'm 32 as of this recording in 2019. And I just realized I had been lied to my whole life. Right. Hey, Ryan, work really hard in school, and then you'll go to a good college, and then you'll get a good job, and then you work really hard, and then you can retire doing what you want. And it turns out like all of that was a lie. Well, to be fair, though, like for our parents, that might have been true.
Right.
Now everybody goes to college. So I went to Wake Forest University. I'm repping right now.
Okay. And I'm a pirate.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Dude, go North Carolina schools, man. But we, I mean, look, I worked really hard in high school. I got a decent SAT, went to a really good school, not an Ivy League, but really good. And I mean, it didn't help. I graduated in 2009, right after the Great Recession, but it took a while to find meaningful employment. And when I did, it really wasn't meaningful. And I think that's the point. Regardless of where you wind up, you rack up student loan debt.
Yep.
And then you find yourself underemployed.
Yep.
In the regard where you feel like you're underpaid for what you do, and you feel like to a certain degree your job's meaningless, and you feel stuck. You feel like, why would I want to get promoted and basically just manage people doing this meaningless work that I'm doing? And so in other words, I don't want to get promoted.
Right.
And I can't leave because I have a certain lifestyle I've put together, and I've got student loan debt to pay off, and I bought a car and blah da dee da.
Right.
So you get stuck, and it's like outrageously depressing. And I mean, like, just and it sounds so first world problem-esque of, oh my God, I get paid well to go to a bank or wherever you're working.
Right.
Where you've taken a shower that day with warm water, and you've had every meal that you've wanted to have, and you're in air conditioning, and you're totally miserable. It sounds like such shut up and toughen up. And for me, I was like, dude, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not playing that. Like, I don't know what happens after I die, but you know what? I'm not gonna be 80 years old thinking back and going, wow, I'm glad I stayed at my job. I decided to make a really big bet on myself and start a real estate company because after years of researching what business I wanted to start, because after a lot of self-reflection, I realized I need to own my own business. And I looked at over 100 businesses. I started unsuccessfully 3 and lost money. And then I found mobile home parks. And the thing about mobile home parks is it fit my skill set to a T, and it fit my dreams, my lifestyle, what I want out of my lifestyle, and it fit my charity goals to the T.
Right.
And my wife hates when I say this, but when I met my wife, I knew she was the one.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
Right.
And it was the same thing with mobile home parks.
Yeah.
Which she's like, don't you dare compare me to a mobile home park.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, that's who I am. That's who I am. So I'm just a young millennial who just was sick of being told by other people what I should and shouldn't want out of my life and what I should and shouldn't do.
Right.
And I ended up finding out that a lot of the advice I was taking were from people who were either also stuck at their jobs and miserable, or just in general, people who are not wealthy. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't just mean like financially wealthy. I mean time freedom wealthy too.
yeah,
And you have to realize that like a lot of the advice you get in your life are from people who don't have what you want.
yeah. And I
You have
don't
to
mean to
find people
interrupt
who.
you here,
Oh
but
no, go ahead.
what do you mean? But when you say time freedom wealthy, I never heard
Sure.
that term.
Yeah, so Tim Ferriss popularized it. I mean, I'm sure he didn't create it, but he was the first I ever heard of the idea of time freedom,
Uh huh.
wealth of your time, and essentially what he argued is $100,000 in New York City is not a lot of money. $100,000 in Costa Rica is a boatload of money, right?
Right, right.
And if you're spending 90 hours a week to make 100,000 versus 10 hours a week,
Yeah.
if you divide that out by how much time you're actually working, there's just different ways to look at income. But ultimately, from a time freedom standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
for example, since I own my own company, I can do whatever I want. So today, this morning, I've exclusively worked on content, and that's it.
Right.
And I felt like working on content today because I did a bunch yesterday, and now I want to edit it and get it out there.
Yeah.
And the truth is, if I worked a normal job, I would have had to go somewhere at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m., wake up, shower, not work in your PJs. You're working for someone else's dream
Right, right.
today. So since I'm in residential real estate, the
Uh huh.
busiest time of the month is always the first week because it's
Yeah.
rent week. Then
Oh
it
yeah.
tapers off after that, and by the last week, it's project week. So I can do whatever I want. And when
Yeah.
my son was born, he was born prematurely, and it was a whole story. It was a nightmare because he was born almost 2 full months early, and he ended up being in the hospital for almost a month.
Oh wow.
And I was there every single day. And I did not have to worry about PTO. I did not
Right.
have to worry about a leave of absence or getting passed over for a promotion
Yeah.
or having my paternity leave being gobbled up by basically having my son in the neonatal intensive care unit. Right? I
Yeah.
didn't have to worry about that because I have time freedom. If I
Right.
wake up on the wrong side of the pillow one day and go, I'm just not going to go to work. I'm just not going to do any work today. I
Yeah.
can do that. If I want to work from sun up to sundown, I can do that. And that's the idea of time freedom, and starting your own business, especially in real estate, can allow you to do that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's powerful, man. Being an entrepreneur gives you that freedom to be able to do whatever you want to do and live life on your terms. And that's why since I've been done with the NFL, man, I just couldn't find myself working a 9 to 5 job, man. Like it's just not possible, man. Especially when you're making that kind of money. And I got my degree in business management over at East Carolina University, and when you come out and look for job opportunities, I got experience from having my own businesses, but not corporate world experience. And they want to pay you, $40,000-$50,000 a year, and to a guy like myself, that just ain't going to cut it. And just ain't going to do it. So having your own entrepreneur activities going on, different businesses going, that's always a plus, man. So tell me, man, why did you decide to go with mobile home parks over like commercial real estate, multifamily, or something of that nature?
So I've kind of always been an unconventional person,
Mm-hmm.
and the thing about mobile home parks is, at least about almost 5 years ago when I started,
Yeah.
not a lot of people were looking at them because Hollywood has painted a really awful picture of what they are. That's obviously
Right.
it's not accurate at all.
Right.
It actually models a lot of single family home
Mm-hmm.
tendencies. But the thing of it was, it was an unconventional play, and since it was an unconventional play, there were opportunities to get in where you normally can't. Right. So if I wanted to go start a giant self storage business, it'd be a whole lot harder than going out and buying a small mobile home park. Right.
Right. Right.
It requires it cash flows immediately, and it's a bunch of units. So and you don't necessarily have to have a lot of experience to get started in it.
Yeah.
And so in other words, there's a lot of reasons why I picked it, but I think the most important thing, beyond the hype of why mobile home parks, is that it fit my skill set like a glove. So
Yeah.
I ended up selling cars for 4 years, and what
Oh
selling
wow.
cars taught me was how to negotiate,
Yeah.
obviously how to sell, how to market myself, how to do operations,
Right.
because in car sales nowadays, they want to get rid of this whole scummy car salesman aspect of the business, a really ugly side of the business. And
Yeah.
so one way
Yeah.
to do that is require surveys. And one thing that that corporate always says is you can't tie surveys to pay.
Right.
But then for the dealership, we're going to require you to have good surveys. Otherwise, we're not going to give you your bonus. So
Right.
what
Right.
happens?
Right.
What happens? The salespeople's pay gets tied to bonus, but under the table, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
so ultimately, what you learn there is customer service, because you could lose thousands on your bonus if you are a jerk of a car salesman, a scummy car
Yeah.
salesman, right? So in other words, it taught me everything from customer service and negotiation to marketing to sales to inventory management. And so
Mm-hmm.
that skill set was perfect for finding mobile home park deals, convincing sellers to sell to me for a reasonable price. And not
Yeah.
only that, selling mobile homes, marketing your properties, all of that,
Mm-hmm.
customer service, all of that fit my skill set to a T. But more
Right.
importantly than that, it provided me meaning and purpose, which corporate America was not.
Right.
So I started a partial scholarship to send kids in my communities to college.
Oh
I
wow.
offer to pay for college applications, because you got to think, if you're in one of my communities and you're paying $300 a month, and the
Yeah.
college apps now are what, like 125 bucks, if not
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
You apply to 3 schools and that wipes out rent for an entire month for a family. So
Yeah.
these are things I'm actively looking for. I do free food giveaways. I've done Bible studies, Zumba classes, little
Oh wow.
concerts, get-togethers. And the reason why I do all this is because it provides me meaning and purpose. And I've always wanted to help youth education. So it matches my skill set, it matches my charitable goals, and it's, at least at the time, there wasn't a lot of institutional money. Now it's overflowing with institutional money. It's a lot harder to, I don't know if I could get started today,
Yeah.
as opposed to 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. So yeah, it
Right.
just kind of, it checked every single box.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome though. Find an opportunity that align with your goals, man. That's the way to go for sure. So when you was getting started, if you can remember back, man, like what was your biggest challenge when you was getting into it initially?
Being an entrepreneur in general, there's just every day it's some ridiculous thing you have to do.
Right.
So like I've got a letter from the North Carolina Department of Revenue sitting right there because they, for some reason, botched something random, even though they sent me a notice for quarter 2, even though quarter 1 and quarter 2 and quarter 3 have already been reported. And it's like it's just, I hate getting those letters because I know it's just some bureaucrat who has the
Right.
information on their table, and now I have to take time out of my day to call them and be like,
Yeah.
you have this information, oh, here it is, yes, thank you, okay, that ate up an hour of my day and now I'm stressed out, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
always like that random annoying stuff. But the really frustrating thing for me, when I was starting, is I had an MBA from Wake Forest. I went undergrad and grad to Wake Forest University.
Mm-hmm.
Good school. I would like to think that having an MBA from a good school and finding a good deal. My first deal had like a debt coverage ratio and almost as high as 2. And
Wow.
I went to 40 banks and I got 40 rejections.
Wow.
40 banks. We had to pull a favor. Or like, imagine going to your investors and selling them on an idea and then being like, oh, by the way, we can't get debt on this.
Oh man.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
there was, oh my gosh, there was a lot of just getting people to take me seriously was a
Yeah.
big deal.
Yeah.
And even now, to a certain degree, after doing 10 transactions, and we've got at least one other under contract, hopefully another one today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, even still, I run into people not taking me seriously. And it,
Right.
I always try to tell people this: if you want to get into real estate, you need to find a way to get into your first deal, because the difference between 0 and 1
Right.
is absolutely monumental. The difference between 1 and 2 is huge, but
Yeah.
there's nothing that will ever be like the difference between never having transacted and doing your first one. Because my second deal, I only reached out to 15 banks and I got 2 to say yes. And one of those 2 that we went with, we ended up doing a bunch more deals with.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, you got to get out there, you got to take action, you got to swing for the fences, and you got to be prepared for ridiculous stuff to come out of nowhere.
Right. 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 So you said you went to 40 different institutions, banks, and
Yep.
everybody said no.
Every single one, and the debt coverage ratio was out of control good. They
Wow.
just we had no experience. We had no experience. We didn't have any money,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted better collateral, basically. So basically, what we had to do is get our investors to sign recourse debt, which eventually we ended up pulling a favor, and long story short, we got it figured out. But I mean, talk about
Right.
having egg on your face, like right out of the
Yeah.
gate.
Yeah, for sure, man. Wow, that's crazy. So I imagine in that scenario, you probably had to give up a little bit of equity in the deal to get an investor to come in and sign on it.
Actually, our investors that we had originally picked were willing to do the recourse part, so nothing actually fundamentally changed, which was
Wow,
extraordinarily lucky. They were
absolutely.
fantastic folks for our first deal. But yeah, I mean, that's one of those things where you've got to transact. You have to have gone through those things
Yeah,
and have your recourse guys. So we have several people who are ready to rock to sign recourse with us if that ever happens again. But truth be told, now at my stage of the game, I can
yeah,
pretty much sign recourse on all of my own deals unless I get a bigger one. At
right.
which point in time, I've got a ton of folks I can go to. So it's like one of those things that I think as you're new getting into it, anyone listening that's getting into it, make sure you network your tail off, because
Right.
you don't know what random thing is going to hit you from a
Yeah,
lending standpoint or a seller standpoint or whatever. And as long as you know who to call,
yeah.
you'll be in great position to circumvent these ridiculous hurdles that inevitably present themselves.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So, on your bio, you said you're looking at the southeastern part of the U.S. So, what markets are you guys focusing on right now?
If I can drive to it and there are a lot of people there, I'm in. So my big thing is I started with nothing. I had
Mm-hmm.
no money, no network, no experience, and no option but to buy something I could drive to. So we
Right.
tried, one of our deals was in Tallahassee, Florida, and I tried to make that work by flying to it, and I
Yeah.
gotta say it was just it ended up being a fine deal, and we have sold our equity stake in that already.
Yeah.
And for like 3 months I flew every other week, and it just wears on you to be in an airplane and be away from your family and be away from your core business too. So
Yeah.
what we've tried to do, because we've seen a lot of other people in my space really get impatient,
Yeah.
and then they'll just go buy anywhere. So like
Right.
I remember a friend of mine told me about a year and change ago that he had something like 13 parks in 11 states. And
Wow.
after a couple drinks after midnight, I'm not going to say who it was, but
Yeah.
after a couple drinks and after midnight, he looked at me square in the face and he was like, I should have done it the way you're doing it. And just
Wow.
clustered within reasonable driving distance, because he's like, you have a 50 to 100 lot park in Kansas, and you live in
Yeah.
Florida or you live in Georgia, and you have to get on a plane to get there. And the good managers, you can't really acquire really strong management until you have, say, 150 lots. So if
Right.
you're below that threshold, it's not a lot of people who are good who are going to want a much lower pay for that. So it's kind of a crapshoot at that point in time. So in other words,
Yeah.
my strategy has been get it close to home. So
Mm-hmm.
I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's where I grew up whenever I went to high school,
Yeah.
and that's where I live. And if I can drive to it within 4 or 5 hours, I'm in. And I don't
Right.
want it in the middle of nowhere. And the reason being is because, in my opinion, rural properties struggle to sell even if they're doing really well.
Yeah.
And even if it's 2008, 2009, properties still sold in major MSAs. Now you're going
Yeah.
to pay up for them. You're going to pay up for them, but because you're getting reduced amount of risk, so reduced amount of a reward. But my thought process is, if I can get it close to home in an area that's growing, that's not rural, sign
Mm-hmm.
me up. I'm interested.
Gotcha. So, when you're looking at these different opportunities, like what are your strike lists of, I need to have this many pads, this many acreage, like what is your guidelines of what you're looking for?
Yeah, I'm a little unconventional in this regard too. Location, location, location. My big thing is I love my grandmother was like the proverbial grandmother, not necessarily my grandmother, although they were both fantastic women.
Right.
The axioms that you hear and you know by heart but you don't use are my favorite for my business. So for example, buy low, sell high. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Right.
Location. It's funny because like we all know that, but we don't do it.
Yeah.
And so like if, for example, when I got my Series 7, when I worked for the bank,
Mm-hmm.
they have these things called odd lots. And
Right.
it's just this weird phenomenon where things are really, stocks are really high. All of a sudden, all these little buyers come and buy the stock.
Yeah.
And then when
Yeah.
stocks start crashing, they start selling. And it's like, that's literally the exact opposite of that conventional wisdom.
Right.
And it's just, it's amazing to me too, how like people don't just pick up the phone and start calling people. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if someone's unemployed and can't do anything for you right now. That doesn't mean in 5-10 years, they're not going to be extremely valuable to you.
Right.
And let me tell you something, because I talk to people who are unemployed. I talk to CEOs.
Mm-hmm.
I talk to everybody in between. And let me tell you something. I have learned some incredible lessons from folks who were like, I apologize, I can't provide you anything. And I'm like,
Right.
dude, you don't understand. You just gave me some amazing wisdom and you didn't even realize you've done it. And then I've talked to CEOs before, wonderful people who have just ooze brilliance, who, not surprisingly, are politicians
Yeah.
and know how to make a non-answer sound brilliant. And you're like, wow, that was awesome. And then you sit back and you're like, you literally said absolutely nothing.
Right.
So
Right.
what I'm getting at there is like those axioms, for example, location, are
Mm-hmm.
what I'm not really that smart of a person, so I'm not going to outsmart the market. I'm just going to do what no one else is doing. And let me tell
Yeah.
you what no one else is doing. No one else is looking at location. People are looking at yield.
Right.
What is going to put money in my pocket right now? Why? Because I have money in the bank and I need to place that capital ASAP.
Yeah.
It's this thing called FOMO, fear of missing out. If I
Right.
don't go, hurry up, go, buy. I would rather buy 1 to 3 deals a year and absolutely knock them out of the park for
Yeah.
everybody involved, for me, my investors, and most importantly, my residents, because my residents are my clients,
Right.
not my investors, not the
Right.
money hitting my account. What, like, at the end of the day, my thought is give me a heavy value add in a phenomenal location. And I
Mm-hmm.
will always have people that want to live with me, even if I muck it up. But I'm not going to muck it up because I'm not going to bite off more than I can chew. So for
Right.
me, if it's in a big market, Charlotte, Atlanta, Asheville,
Yeah.
Durham, we've even looked at, not to knock ECU, but man, that Greenville market,
Yeah.
we look at bigger MSAs like that.
Right.
You know,
Right.
because I don't want to be in the middle of nowhere. But yes, we
Yeah. Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
have, by the way, almost bought some property up by your Pirates, man.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Man, Greenville they coming up a little bit over here for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's
Definitely.
true. It is.
Absolutely, man. So when you're underwriting a deal, like what red flags are you looking for in the numbers?
That's a great question. So I talk about this on my podcast, which is your underwriting is just as good as your assumptions. Garbage in, garbage out. Talk about
Yeah.
axioms from grandma, right? Garbage
Right.
in, garbage out. There's a wonderful quote that went along the lines of, there's been more fiction written in Microsoft Excel than Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
And it's true. You know why? Because when you do your underwriting and it shoots
Mm-hmm.
out a couple decimals on an IRR, you tend to believe it.
Yeah.
And all that is a guess. And your guess is
Right.
only as good as how well you know that asset class. So that's a big reason why I literally go and sleep on my properties. I consume the product I'm selling
Yeah.
because I want to know what is. So to use home flipping as an example,
Mm-hmm.
if the facade looks awful but the foundation is strong and no one is like, oh, that looks awful, I don't want it, but I walk the home and I'm like, hey man, the foundation's really strong, I can for a couple $1,000 make this look phenomenal and make way a ton of money.
Right. Right.
That's the
Right.
type of person, that's the type of investor I want to be. Someone who knows where the foundation is and how to tell if it's a strong foundation, right? So for
Yeah.
me, when I'm doing my underwriting, what I am looking for is a couple things. First and foremost, I want to make sure that I can achieve good enough returns that is worth my time, but not just worth or worth the money, but not just worth the money, worth my time. So in other
Right.
words, it may be a lower returning deal that's really turnkey. And if you
Mm-hmm.
divide the money I make out by the amount of time I have to spend on it, it looks really good. And the
Yeah.
flip of that, I remember I had this opportunity in Fayetteville, North Carolina. On paper, it looked amazing. It's like
Mm-hmm.
40 lots for $300,000.
Right.
And it looked absolutely amazing. But what we realized when we did the math is, because the deal was brought to us, and because, long story short, we only were going to end up with a sliver of the equity. The amount of, even if we just crushed it out of the park, it would have taken 2 or 3 years to crush it. At the end of
Yeah.
the day, it would have not really made us but 10, 20, maybe $30,000 a year during that period. Whereas on another property, it may have been a whole lot more work, but
Yeah.
been able to achieve in a much more condensed period of time.
Right.
So in other words, one big thing that I look at in my underwriting is how much time is it going to achieve? Because if you divide it out, it might not actually look that attractive. But
Yeah.
beyond just the underwriting, I'm also looking at other things like, how many homes do I have to bring in? What are the quality of the homes that are there? What is
Yeah.
the quality of the surrounding neighborhoods? Because I'm sorry, you can bring in brand new homes and sell them for really great deals,
Yeah.
but if you are next to an absolute dumpster,
Yeah.
you are just going to struggle selling new good homes. That whole not in my backyard thing applies all across the board. So
Right.
there are a lot of things that you have. Police reports, that's a really another important thing to look at. There's
Yeah.
a lot of things that I look at beyond just what is my IRR, what is my cash on cash. I'm looking at how much time is it going to take, what are the surrounding areas, what are the guts of that property that I'm looking at right there. And the
Yeah.
only way you get this is by going just full time into your whatever niche you pick and just
Yeah.
go gung ho and learn everything there is to learn.
Right, right. Those are some very good points, man. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people can apply that. And regardless of whatever asset class they're in, and if they apply those principles, they're going to get some good results out of it for sure. Now, I know you have a lot of guys reaching out to you because you're doing some big things. Like, what is the biggest rookie mistakes you're seeing right now with everybody trying to get into this asset class?
Not taking enough action, by far and away, not taking enough action. And also, not only not taking enough action, but not taking enough action because they're not thinking.
Yeah,
And let me explain what I mean by that. It's a lot easier nowadays to get educated because
yeah,
there's a lot of podcasts, a lot of free content.
right,
And the thing of it is, the most popular ones are always the people who are selling something, right?
yeah,
Because they're the
yeah,
best salespeople. They know how to market, and then they want to
absolutely.
monetize their large audience, and I
Right,
can't blame
right,
them.
right.
And so that's why, like, a podcast like yours is going to be great because it's raw,
Yeah,
actionable content. But unfortunately, we've gotten flooded. The market's just been flooded with all sorts of hype stories. And the
yeah,
problem is, when you are in a job that you hate and
yeah,
you want to escape it, and you hear something like a mobile home park, oh my god, that's it, that's going to be the thing that saves me, right?
right, right, right.
And you don't stop to ask, is this truly going to make me happy? Does this truly fit my skill set? And you don't really ask those questions.
Yeah,
What you'll do is you'll get you drunk on a hype story.
yeah,
That is one of many different ways to approach a real estate niche. And what'll end up happening is you'll end up taking the same formula for success that one person is pitching and selling, and then you'll apply it and find you can't find any deals. And the reason you can't find any deals is because you're not different.
yeah,
And so what that ends up doing is, for even people who would take action if they had an opportunity, they either won't take action because truly what all they're trying to do is entertain themselves and distract themselves from how miserable they are and feeling stuck in their job. So
yeah,
they're ultimately never going to take action. Or people who would take action, but they can't find their way in. So what I would say to anyone starting out is, yes, you need to go and listen to any podcast you can. You need to
yeah.
read blogs, you need to watch videos, you need to network with anyone you can possibly network. But
Right.
you need to be different. And it's funny because I talk to all the major brokers in my space, and
Yeah.
it's just funny because they know what offers they're going to get from newbies, because there was this one group that has a training course that
Mhm.
hyped up my industry, and they have
Yeah.
like a valuation tool that they
Yeah.
give out. And these brokers are like, I know half of my offers are going exactly what half of my offers are going to be because
Right.
everyone uses the same thing. So it's like you're not going
Yeah.
to be different if you're, what you really realistically need to be is
Yeah.
you need to be the remix, right?
Yeah.
So in other words, you need to take the guts of all of these different people you're learning from, and then you need to put your own twist on it,
Right.
right? You take something brilliant, you add a baseline to it, right?
Yeah.
Not I'm going to copy and paste and oh my gosh, why can't I find any good properties? You can't find any good
Yeah.
properties because you're not doing anything different.
Right. 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 So would you say that the people that's going to these investing seminars, it's all around the country, everybody's selling coaching and courses, you think those investors are wasting their time, or well, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I am the son of a college professor. I will always be pro education. And like I mentioned earlier, my charitable dream is to really scale up a scholarship because I want
Right.
kids to get their education. So I will never trash education.
Yeah.
I will never do that. Go
Right.
get educated. Just know that just because you've gone to a seminar, that doesn't mean you're going to go out there and that's going to be that, right? I went to the seminar, now give me success, right?
Yeah.
I'll put it to you this way. If you wanted to start a plumbing company,
Yeah.
would you go to a seminar and listen to some podcasts and then go and open a plumbing company? No, of
Heck no.
course you wouldn't. Would you apply the same concept if you were starting a restaurant? No, you wouldn't.
Right.
Maybe that's not a fair proxy, right? Because maybe real estate is a little bit less complex and doesn't require the licensing that plumbing does and following food regulations do. But here's
Hmm.
where I will push your audience, Willie. I
Yeah.
will say, if you would take a different mindset, if I told you you had to go buy a restaurant this year
Yeah.
and you would sit back and go, well, I would do X, Y, and Z. And that X, Y, and Z is different than the X, Y, and Z you would pick if you're going out to buy real estate.
Yeah.
Then you need to stop and go, maybe I'm not thinking about real estate properly.
Right.
Maybe what I need to do here is go, oh my God, maybe this really needs a different business type viewing methodology to look at this.
Yeah.
And the reason why that's really relevant is because that's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
And I found other ways that revenue streams could be achieved. And I
Yeah.
found a way to have no money, no experience, and no network, and quit my job and monetize things within my industry to go full time. And
Right.
then once you go full time, what you'll find is there are deals everywhere.
Yeah.
And you're just not seeing them because you're on LoopNet for an hour a week.
Right.
I've
Right.
bought
Right.
I bought one deal off LoopNet ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
I
other
mean,
9 come from everything else. Sorry, go ahead.
right. Right. And I was just going to say, I'm a broker myself, and basically LoopNet is where deals go to die. If it hasn't sold before it hit LoopNet, the
Right.
good chances are it's not a good deal at all. So let's go ahead and segue into our next segment of the show, man.
Sure.
The generational wealth listeners, man. We want to talk about a deep dive on a deal that you've recently done. Just kind of see some ins and outs on it, so they can get a better idea of what it looks like when you taking out one of these deals. So the first question
Sure.
on that would be is what's the best deal you've done in the past 12 months as far as mobile home parks go?
I've done a bunch. So I think probably the most relevant one would be the smallest deal I've ever bought, which I bought in January.
Mm-hmm.
It's 25 lots. And I actually did buy that off LoopNet, believe it or not.
Oh wow.
And the reason why I bought it off LoopNet is because it was only about an hour from my house.
Uh-huh.
It was very stable. And there are a few fundamental errors that the seller was making that we were able to realize pretty early on. Now,
Right.
it was overpriced
Yeah.
per usual. So we had to do a little bit of negotiating, but we were
Mm-hmm.
able to get a more fair price. And it was a good price. We paid what, like 525,000 for 25 lots, so a little over 20,000
Yeah.
a pad. So it was market pricing, maybe a little bit over market, depending on how you cut it. There was a couple
Yeah.
key things they were doing wrong. First and foremost, they had a pull away dumpster right in the middle of the property. And if you know anything about pull away dumpsters versus individual cans, It's that people from outside the communities are going to come and throw stuff away in there.
That's
And
right.
people within your community are going to go and throw chairs and furniture and all
Right,
kinds of stuff.
right, right.
And some people will abuse it. Some people just generate a lot of trash,
Yep.
whereas some people just don't. And so we immediately switched to individual cans for about the same price per month.
Yeah.
And immediately the trash bill plummeted because immediately all the neighbors could see the 2 or 3 residents who were completely abusing the
Yeah.
communal trash can. There's a bunch of stuff like that we did. We're putting up a volleyball area and a little communal area that we can't bring in new mobile homes to. We
Oh
put
wow.
a really nice playground. It was like $2,000 for this playground
Yeah.
and soccer goals. So we increase the usability in the community
Right.
aspect in the communal areas. We clean up the trash.
Yeah.
We also the leases that some of these tenants had were abysmal for the landlord. So what we
Uh-huh.
ended up doing was we actually lowered a few people's payments
Oh
so
wow.
we could get them on more favorable terms for the landlord. But the reason why I say more favorable for the landlord is because if people are acting up, I need a way to get them out. So I'm
Yeah.
not doing that so I can take advantage of people. I'm doing that to protect their neighbors. If they start some riffraff, I
Yeah.
can get them out. So
Right.
in other words, and it benefits them too because their payment went down. And then for other folks within the community that were under market rent, I raised them up a little bit more to still about market, about slightly under market relative to that area. So in other words, you increase the value, you cut out some poor practices, you lower expenses a little bit, you reinvest in the community to help build a community, and
Yeah.
then you raise rents up to market.
Right.
And so far it has been an awesome property for us.
Right, right. Now, when you're pricing your rents for as the market go, um, have you ever tried to push the rents above what market is, depending on what you're doing to the community? Like, because it sounds like you're doing some really nice things to this community here to make it like a place where somebody would want to stay. So, have you ever tried to push rents above market?
Absolutely. And the reason why is because a lot of times you'll see things that are coming a mile away. So I'll give you a great for example, the bigger markets. So I told you I play in bigger markets, right?
Right,
Charlotte,
right.
Atlanta, Asheville. Institutional money is pouring into those communities like crazy.
Yeah,
And so the bigger ones are, you'll see these like, so I'll give you a good for example in Spartanburg, South Carolina, an institutional buyer came in and cranked their rents up to 390. And
shucks.
when we started buying in Spartanburg, we determined the market to be about 250. And I still know people to this day
Wow,
under 200.
wow.
So the market is all over the place. We priced ours at 295 before the institutional players came in,
Mm-hmm.
which was about, it was on the high end, right? So if the average
Yeah,
was 250, there were some people at and above 300. There were some people below 200 and still below 200. So we
yeah,
figured 295 was uh, a good way to do it. But we also, what we did was we promised these folks in writing in a
yeah.
contract that we were not going to raise rents for 3 years. So
Right.
in other words, hey, look, we know we're up in terms of other communities here, but we're going to guarantee you we're not going to raise rents for
Yeah.
3 years, say.
Right.
And
Right.
then we're going to reinvest by when and for example, we own Countryside, Eastgate, and East Side and Spartanburg, and we've repaved roads, we've installed new mailboxes, we've done the playground thing,
Yeah.
we've done irrigation work, we've installed new lift stations, we've pumped a ton, we've pumped hundreds of thousands of dollars into these communities,
Right.
got a lot of bad people out, brought in some amazing people in.
Yeah.
So there's additional value that these people are getting because we're reinvesting in our communities.
Right.
And then right in the middle of that 3 year period, what happens? Institutional money starts flooding the market and they're almost $100 more than us.
Yeah. Yeah. So in
So
that
yes,
scenario, when the institutional buyers come in, that helps kind of everybody though, right? Because you can push your rents even more if it the market
it,
suggests it.
so this is one of those ethical dilemmas, right? Because
Right.
technically in just basic economics 101, you are ethically, it's a double-edged sword, right? You
Right.
are ethically obliged to your investors to get the most amount of money you can get, right? Because they're
Right.
trusting you with their money. But at the
Absolutely.
same time, and so in other words, from an investor standpoint, if I have bananas that and I determine the market to be 10 cents, but it's the same thing, and I can sell it for 15 cents and clear out my inventory, then ethically speaking, I should sell these for 15 cents, right?
Right.
So, in other words, are you necessarily ethically obliged to the folks that have been there for 10, 20 years? On the one hand, yeah, you are, because
Yeah.
these are poor folks who are down on their luck.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, from the investor standpoint and from just the market in general, right? Because what if there are a lot of other great people out there who could afford the higher rent and are desperate to pay you that, and they'll be better residents?
Right.
It's an ethical conundrum that I have to face every single
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, is that necessarily a good thing? Yes and no. So the good thing about having higher lot rent is if you are ethically minded and you want to reinvest in your communities and justify that higher revenue amount, you
Yeah.
can do some wonderful things. So we got hosed at one of our communities that was city sewer by a woman who owned the private lines, and she was hosing people so bad. When I called the attorney general,
Yeah.
this is a true story,
Dang.
I had to call the attorney general
Wow.
for that state. And when I was explaining my what was going on to whomever answers the phone at
Yeah.
the Utilities Commission division of the attorney general, they literally said the woman by first and last name. I was like, oh
Wow.
wow, I am not the first one to call here, right?
Yeah.
So in other words, this woman was charging and is charging like $75 a home for sewer, which
Yeah.
is absurd.
That's
And so
crazy.
because I charge more on my rent, I can eat that for my tenants to a certain degree. So
Yeah.
I was able to eat that for about a year until I basically I went to my residence and I was like, I can't keep doing this. Can I pay $25 and you pay the other 50?
Yeah.
I got almost no objections from that.
Right.
So in other words, having higher lot rent allows someone like me to buy playgrounds, repave things, fix lift stations, help
Yeah.
them out if there's some ridiculous nonsense going on by a
Yeah.
utility company. I can help protect them, but at the same time, that also opens up the door for folks who are just chasing yield.
Right.
So
Right.
it's again a bit of a double-edged sword.
Yeah. 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 I got you. That makes a lot of sense, man. Now revisiting the 20 unit that you recently purchased, what kind of debt did you put on that?
The wonderful thing is that was a complete seller carry deal.
Oh wow.
So non-recourse seller carry. It's got a 5-year balloon. It's a
Yeah.
reasonable interest rate, and she's an old school older woman. I mail her a check once a month. I email her daughter just to let her know that the
Right.
check's in the mail,
Wow.
and it's not non-recourse. It's a wonderful situation because they were getting seriously tired
Yeah.
of the community, and this is what I do full time. That was their only mobile home park, and they're mostly apartments. So it ended up
Yeah.
being an absolute wonderful situation for everyone involved. But of my 10 deals, that is the only one I've ever been able to pull off seller carry.
Oh man. Well, that's fantastic. Those are the best kind of deals, right? Best kind of deals.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, now I didn't ask you this previously. So, when you're buying these communities, are you planning to, exit after 5 to 10 years, or are you planning to hold forever?
So that's a great question for a lot of reasons, because what my business partner and I are going through right now, which I think is relevant to a lot of folks in a couple years down the road, is when someone comes and gives you an unsolicited offer for a boatload of money, like above market.
Right.
And it kind of makes you sit back and go, well, my plan here was to buy these, refinance them, and just cash flow them indefinitely, which
Right.
we had done 2 out of 3 in our Spartanburg portfolio. We'd refinanced 2, and then out of the blue, we got an offer that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so high it doesn't make sense. And so we're going to try today, later on this afternoon, to sniff out any objections and see if this is just nonsensical or what.
Right.
But it poses a really good question,
Yeah.
right? And I think if your goal is to be a long-term holder, you need to be able to do a couple key metrics when because you need to have an exit number, period.
Right.
Right? Because eventually someone may come around out of the blue and offer you a number that you can't refuse. And I'll give you a great, for example. A good friend of mine, Mike Conlon of Affordable Communities Group, had a
Mm-hmm.
portfolio of apartment complexes, and he had a number in mind, and it
Yeah.
was obnoxiously high.
Right.
and someone hit that number, and he sold his entire apartment portfolio in 2008, right
Wow.
before the crash. And
Wow.
then he took all of that money and bought mobile home parks. And let's just say he's done extraordinarily well. So
I imagine so.
in other words, you always need to have an exit number in mind.
Right.
And what you ought to do is look at some things like, how much money do I think this could be worth when I'm done completely getting rents to market? So, like, for example, to just full disclosure, it was my Spartanburg portfolio that got a ridiculous unsolicited offer. And
Right.
what I'm going through now and calculating is, well, if I'm at 295 and I can't raise my rents for another year or two, or however long we have left on it,
Yeah.
if market's going to 390, I need to go through and do the calculation of how much is the NOI going to be when I can crank everyone successfully to 390,
Right.
right? And how much money is going to be left on the table if I sell now versus I hold it and I hit that number. So in other words, what's like a terminal value type
Right. Right.
number? And I went through and I did that math, and it was not that much more money.
Yeah.
Even if I was complete with the turnaround,
Right.
it
Right.
would
Right.
not have netted me that much more money. And so that's where things get interesting.
Right.
Is if someone comes through and so if you are selling pizza dough and
Mm-hmm.
someone comes through and offers you the price of a completed pizza for your pizza dough, and you don't have to do any more work,
Yeah.
you need to know what that figure is. So, and another really important thing to consider there is cash in hand. Imagine if I sold all of my holdings right now, and
Yeah.
imagine if this recession that everyone's been predicting for the last 5
Right.
years
Right. Right.
hits in 2020, and I have a bunch of cash sitting in my bank account because I sold out like Mike did in 2008.
Yeah.
That would be a really good position to be in. So in other words,
Absolutely.
regard so as a former chess player, not a good
Mm-hmm.
one, but as a former chess player, one of the best lessons I got from chess was the person who is winning the chess match
Mm-hmm.
before the word checkmate is said is the person with the most moves on the table. So in other words, you should definitely be either a flipper or a buy and
Right.
holder or some hybrid. You should have a strategy you should be rigid on, but you
Right.
should never be too rigid to be able to pivot on a dime if the right opportunity comes around. So
Right.
maximize your options.
Right. I mean, that's some really good advice there, because all of those different scenarios could be a possibility. And like you said, I play chess, but believe me, I'm probably nowhere near as good as you. But I do
I'm
like to
not
play.
that good at chess.
For sure, man. But having more moves is always a plus, man. Having a plan A,
Yeah,
B, C, and D is great for sure. All right, man. So podcast is running a little long here. Let's go ahead and get ready to wrap this up. Let's do a lightning round
sure.
to finish this out. All right.
Yeah.
So what's the best advice you've ever been given?
Know thyself. The better you are at knowing who you are and
Yep.
what you like and don't like,
Right.
the quicker you'll be able to make decisions. Like Warren Buffett and Steve Jobs say, you want to say no way more than you say yes. And the only way you can do that quickly and efficiently is to know who you are and what you want out of life. And after spending decades trying to figure out who I am, I still don't know who I am. So if you're listening in and you go, oh, that's easy, I know myself. No, you don't. And you
Right.
need to spend time figuring it out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's great advice there. What's the best book you've read this year?
Extreme Ownership. That book is just a game changer. The
Yeah.
idea that you take responsibility, no matter if it was your fault or not, to create a culture around that. And it just allows you to circumvent your own ego and so many other people's egos to get to the right answer. Must read book.
Who's the author? Do you remember?
It was a group of Navy SEALs, and I
Mm-hmm.
apologize, I can't remember. If you just type in Extreme
Yeah.
Ownership, it was a
I
bestseller.
put it in the show notes. Okay, great. So what are some rituals that you're doing right now to help you succeed?
Duolingo. I do Duolingo every single day. I'm on, I don't know, 860, 870 days in a row. It's 15
Wow.
minutes. Yo puedo hablar mucho español ahora porque yo practico todos los días. If you practice a little bit every single day,
Yeah.
you will learn. And let me tell you something.
Yeah.
If you find yourself saying, well, if they're coming to my country, they better learn my language. Let me tell
Mm-hmm.
you something. You might be right.
Yeah.
You might be right, but you know what you won't be? You won't be making any more money. Because
Yeah.
let me tell you something, while you are angry over in the corner because you can't speak their language, I taught myself their language and I'm going to make money and serving them because they
Right.
have money and they are looking to spend that money and I
Oh
will
yeah.
help them spend that money for
Oh
a
yeah.
price. So get out
Absolutely.
there and teach yourself Spanish because in like 10, 20 years, 25% of the population is going to be Spanish speaking.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, man. I actually
Duolingo's free.
yeah, definitely, man. I played around with Rosetta Stone for a little bit, but I wasn't consistent with it. So you like Duolingo, it's really working for you.
Every day. And the reason why, so I did Rosetta Stone and I ended up quitting.
Yeah.
And what I just realized is it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
You, no matter what vessel medium you choose, you just have to do it every day. Even if
Yeah.
it's for 5 to 15 minutes a day,
Right.
if you just do it every day. And the cool thing about Duolingo is it has that thing built in right there. And you can send yourself notifications and it will be a jerk to you
Yeah.
and it will motivate you to do every single day, and that is the key to success, not spending $1 billion talking, getting a pen pal in Colombia,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
buying something that Tim Ferriss recommends.
Right.
Doing something every day is infinitely better than doing a lot for like 2 weeks.
Right. Right. Absolutely, man. Consistency is key for sure. What is one thing you're doing right now in your business to help you improve?
Oh, a lot of things, man. So one big thing that I'm doing right now is I'm doing a lot of outreach. So I don't have anything for sale. I'm not raising any money. I've got my podcast, Mobile Home Parks in Real Life. I'm churning out content. And the reason why I'm doing that is multifaceted. First and foremost, my industry is plagued with slumlords.
Yeah.
And if I can help teach people who, like I mentioned earlier, there's the problem a lot of newbies are having is they're either not taking action or they can't take action. But if I
Right.
can get out there and encourage people to be different and show them how they can be different and give them tools absolutely for free,
Yeah.
I can help good people get into my industry
Right.
and help combat slumlordism. And not only that, like I said, it's all about who you know, not what you know. I feel like if I put myself out there and give people free stuff,
Yeah.
not expect a thing in return, I
Mm-hmm.
think eventually I'm going to meet some pretty awesome people. And even if I don't, like I said earlier, some of the best lessons I've ever learned were from people that you would never guess would ever just be full of wisdom. So I want to meet people and I want to help combat slumlordism. And someone asked me this on an interview I did recently, like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I went through all your stuff. You're giving away some serious secrets there.
Right.
Are you fear you're training up your competition? And my answer to that is no, because I will always have competition, period.
Yeah.
So if I
Yeah.
can help if I get outbid on a deal by someone who consumed my content,
Yeah.
I can live with that so much more than some private equity shop that's never going to show up to the property.
Right, right, right. Absolutely, man. That's some good stuff there for sure. Last question here, man. I'm gonna let you go. I know we're running along here. If you could give your younger self one tip in regards to investing, what would that be?
Oh, that's hard to pick one, but
Yeah,
I have to say, just do more of what you did, because what I did, what I realized at a young age, not young enough, but like maybe 23 years old, my dad gave me a gift when I graduated Wake at 22.
hmm
That was quickly spent, very quickly spent,
right.
which was dumb because it was for a woman that made lot. I'll leave that story for another day.
That's a long story,
let's
right?
let's just say love will trick you into some things
Oh
that
yeah,
are
oh
not
yeah,
fiscally responsible.
most
But
definitely.
at about 23, I remember sitting down with a financial advisor at Fidelity Investments, and he looked at me and he was like, "You understand at 23 years old, if you're able to start saving now, compounding interest."
hmm
And we did the math, and I remember he was like, if you save $1,000, I can't remember what it was, but it was like $1,000 a year versus starting now for the rest of your life versus $5,000 a year starting at 30. So only
Yeah,
8 years later, seven
right,
years
right,
later, $5,000 a year for the rest of your life. We did the math, and it was just mind-bogglingly. It's a huge number.
right.
And so, in other words, compounding interest is a tremendous thing. You need to find a way to save everything, every penny you put in
Yeah.
to your investment, regardless if it's just a simple life cycle fund or
Right.
whether you're buying real estate. Every penny that you invest, you are buying your time, getting one step closer to your time freedom.
Yeah.
And like I said, I hit it in my early 30s, which I'm extraordinarily fortunate to have hit. But let me tell you something about time freedom.
Yeah.
It is as awesome as you think it is. Right
Right.
now, you still need to find meaning and purpose, and there's a dark side of it. But
Yeah.
let me tell you something, to be there when my premature son was born and to be there every single day for him in the hospital is something that I am forever grateful to my earlier self for having done. So take my advice.
Right.
Start saving immediately if you haven't already, because
Yeah.
you do not. My son was born on a Thursday at 3:45 p.m. I absolutely would have been at work
Yeah.
if I had my own job. Get saving. Compounding interest will reward you.
Right. Right. Well, hey, man, I really appreciate your time today, Ryan, man.
Yeah.
I'm sure my listeners are going to get a lot from this. And so tell my listeners, man, how can they reach out to you?
Really easy. Just like you found me, Willie, LinkedIn is the best platform to find me. My name is Ryan Narus. It's spelled Narus. That's N like Nancy. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can find me on my website, archimedesgrp.com. Quite frankly, I need a simpler name because Archimedes is impossible to spell.
Right.
But you can just Google me and all of my contact information comes up, and do not be afraid to reach out. I am not selling anything. I'm not looking for funds. I am literally looking for good, to help good people make a difference in this world. If I can leave this world better off for me having been here, and I can help inspire you to want to go out there and help people and escape your job and do that too. Oh my gosh, reach
Right.
out to me. I want to help you.
Fantastic, man. Really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, I loved it. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for listening to the Generational Wealth Through Commercial Real Estate podcast, brought to you by Onyx Capital Investments. Onyx Capital Investments works with investors nationwide to invest in income-producing real estate in emerging markets. Connect online at www.onyxcapitalinvestments.com to learn more about what we're doing. If we have added value to your life, please leave us a review.